Story 1. The Reserve. Until recently, I had considered the reserve near my home just another quiet, if slightly unnerving, relic of pre-suburban life, with subdivisions and commercial sectors rising steadily around it. The knot of thick trees, greenery, and long, straw-like grass had been cast aside by time, a mottled green and brown fortress among the ever-expanding web of houses and streets. Nothing about the area seemed inviting. Entirely unkempt, the reserve, which stretched out over a square mile, was visibly overgrown. It was near impossible to make out any detail amongst the trees, as a natural wall, the old branches and predatory vines weave together on the outskirts to truly reinforce the isolated, island-like nature of this heavily shadowed place. During my childhood, I remembered that the area had been popular with trekkers and runners. A long tourist trail wound from one corner of the park to the OT, providing a nature walk for visitors to what, at the time, was a very tourism-oriented area. The walk would take the best part of an hour, with the trail weaving through patches of woodland and large open areas of tall, pale-colored grass at the center of the reserve. Considering the lack of anything truly spectacular about the place, it is no wonder that after several years the local still abandoned consistent maintenance of the park. They had quoted a lack of public use for the decision, and had then planned to sell the area to commercial developers. Through my research, I discovered that it was around this time the disappearances started. Although the authorities had abandoned the reserve to the elements, some runners insisted on continuing to use the area. The council had made no efforts to actually fence off the area, instead choosing to erect several temporary signs at the track entrances indicating the impending sell-off of the land. As such, it was safe enough to simply enter the area. The thick masses of foliage had already begun to press into the path, narrowing the already small trail. It was somewhere along this isolated track that runners began to vanish. Over the course of 6 months, 3 different people had entered into one end of the path, never to emerge from the other. Police invested significant resources on all 3 occasions, searching the reserve with dozens of volunteers, but no bodies were ever discovered. This deepening mystery had an immediate ripple effect, with the company expected to purchase and make use of the reserve withdrawing their application. With no other serious offers, the council then left the land to itself, listing it officially as a nature reserve. To my knowledge, they have never again attempted to sell the land. As the years passed, the local homeless population began slowly migrating into the area. Makeshift shelters and camps sprung up deep into the wilderness. During my teenage years, I clearly remember seeing disheveled, untidy hermits plunging into the then entirely overgrown track entrances, as if the woods themselves had reached out for them and consumed them whole. In recent years, the park has been as good as forgotten by the greater society. It still looms over the homes of those families it borders, but to some, having evidence of more untouched nature at their doorstep must be a blessing rather than a curse. But it is a curse. The whole area is cursed, and it was almost enough to ensure that I never wrote this story down. You see, I made the mistake of discovering the secret of the reserve. I didn't even do it intentionally. It started purely by chance, from an unlikely source. One afternoon, Several weeks ago, I had planned on walking several miles to a party someone from my college was hosting. I had never been to their house before, so I had punched their address and my own into the Maps website to check for the fastest route. The program had returned 3 alternatives, 2 of which would take me almost 2.5 hours. The third option, however, showed as less than 1.5. The blue line on the map worked its way from my house to blocks to the edge of the reserve, then traced the original tourist trail before emerging out the other side, only several streets from my destination. Despite the almost instant apprehension about crossing that place at night, I think I had already decided I would risk it to shave an hour off the trek. It wasn't long before I was standing at edge of the green, imposing mass. After checking my phone one last time and wishing, fruitlessly, that it now showed a different path, I plunged into the undergrowth. The sensation of walking on human-constructed ground wasn't instant, as over time foliage had even grown over the gravel trail. But soon the earth hardened, the trees parted ever so slightly, and a thin, shadowy trail was revealed after 15 minutes or more of maneuvering through low-hanging branches. Guided by the impressively powerful light on my phone, I pushed through a net of thick vines and shrubbery to emerge at the mouth of the grassed section of the park. The pale blade stretched upward, easily towering over me. Some fell lazily over the path, bending at their middle, but the trail was still defined enough to push onward. About halfway across the reserve, still engulfed in the imposing grass, I came across by a small clearing. The grass parted to reveal a loosely circular bare patch, no bigger than a basketball court. I slowly swept my light across the clearing, and at its center stopped on what appeared to be the silhouette of another person. As my eyes adjusted, I quickly realized that it wasn't another human at all, but a grass giant. Long strands of the surrounding grass had been cut or pulled out and intricately woven into a human effigy. It was secured in place with a gnarled tree limb, which had been embedded in the earth. The figure loomed, standing at least 8 feet tall, its arms hanging downward almost to the ground. Below, its head was rectangular, featureless, a knot of grass blades rising above the figure's low, drooping shoulders. I cautiously approached the bizarre creation, refusing to let my leave it. As I reached the grossman, I tentatively reached out to touch it. I'm still not sure why. As my arm extended forward, I heard a rustling directly to my right. I paused, head, arm outstretched. Listening, the sound came again, a clear movement in the grass. For the first time since arriving at the clearing, I shifted my light as I began to scan the grass encircling me. As I swept my light to the right, it revealed a man standing quietly at the clearing's edge. He wore a large overcoat and appeared to be covered in dirt and dust. Even with the light shining directly on him, I couldn't make out any of the details of his face, his long, matted hair hanging down below his chin. The grass beside him rustled, and several more figures emerged, none too dissimilar. From the first, I was obviously terrified, but knew almost instantly who they were. I quickly rationalized that they were members of the homeless community in the park, and that I had walked into one of their areas as that moment seemed to stretch into eternity. I finally found the courage to act. I ran diving forward under the overhang grass figure and towards the opposite side of the clearing. From behind me I heard only a single sound, a male voice, quiet and rough, said, "They won't like this." I powered forward along the trail, breathing heavily, my light sweeping wildly in the dark. Without ever looking back, I made it to the edge of the reserve and emerged triumphant from the trees. I was shaken by the encounter, but refused to let it rule my thoughts, trying to understand why these hermits had constructed a grass man or what they used it for. Both seemed fruitless thoughts. I had a party to go to, and wasn't going to let any of this ruin my NIGHT. As with most college parties in my town, it was a pretty big let down. I drank to overcome the dullness of the people I spent the night navigating my way around, both physically and socially. I drank to muck it seemed, because on leaving the party somewhere around 2 in the morning, I had entirely forgotten the encounter earlier in the night. My brain, however, did choose to remember that I had talked in the wooded shortcut to the party and mobilized my feet back in that direction. I shuffled into the trees almost robotically, guided by that inbuilt GPS we all seem to have for home, or we can somehow consciously construct little else. The next thing I clearly remember, having apparently already made it back to the clearing, was facing the tall, woven figure again. It dominated my perspective. Hunched over in the thin beams of moonlight, I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, having seemingly given up on using my light some time earlier. The memories of my previous run-in with the clearing quickly flooded back, and I anxiously glanced at the clearing boundaries, searching for any signs of movement. Almost instantly, I again heard a shuffling noise, a rustling, indistinct. This time I couldn't exactly tell where it was coming from. I finally pried my phone from my jeans pocket and, fumbling, switched on the light. As I raised it forward and revealed the grass figure, the source of the sound became apparently the effigy lurched, a staccato jerking motion, as its arms raised their hanging grass knuckles from the earth. The legs each shuffle, head slowly forward, each moving as if seen through a strobe light. The branch securing the creature to the ground fell loose to the earth. With the short, sharp movements, the grass man, with arms now stretching onward in my direct, moved closer at a frighteningly fast rate. I think I screamed, "I'm not sure anymore," and ran to my right, plunging straight into the tall grass. Sharp blades whipped against my face and hands, causing small cuts, but that was the least of my concerns at the time. As I ran on, I felt almost instantly sober, my senses working overtime as I continued to run. I could hear the creaking, shuffling sound of the figure behind me, unsure how far back it was. As if on cue, my foot caught in a tight knot of dead grass, and I tripped forward as the grass in front of me parted. As I regained my balance, I quickly became still as another clearing appeared in front of me, far larger than the previous one. As my light pierced the darkness, dozens of grass figures were spread across the glade, each of them, almost in unison, turned at the waist, their torsos bending to face me, their featureless, shapeless heads twisting around to acknowledge my arrival. As I turned to run, I noticed, out of the corner of my eye, the homeless people from earlier in the night. They were huddled at the other edge of the clearing, kneeling down over what looked like a large pile of loose grass. They raised their heads, and I could feel their gaze upon me. I dived back into the long grass, plowing forward blindly through the dense EXP. Unsee, I could hear the sounds of my pursuer, or pursuers, but they quickly began to fade into the distance. Struggling to breath, my lungs burning in my chest, I reached the tree line and, as tumbled back out into the world, I somehow found the strength to continue to run all the way home, bursting inside and securing every door and window and every room within minutes. I collapsed onto my bed, the lights left on, and waited. I'm not sure for what, but it didn't feel like the events of the night were over. Despite this, the tiredness must have overcome me, because I somehow slept. I slept almost the whole following day. When I awoke, it all truly felt like a bad dream, a nightmare more twisted, more real than any I had experienced before. I doubted my own thoughts, my fears. It didn't take long after I awoke to convince myself, through the haze of a fairly heavy hangover, that it all had been some sort of bad waking hallucination. After the amount of alcohol I had consumed, I quickly came to believe that I'd scared myself into jumping at shadows the whole way home. Emerging from bed, I noticed that I still had my shoes on. Dirt was spread through my bed and my room. I cursed at myself for the stupid mistake and removed the shoes, carrying them to the front door. I opened it to place the shoes outside. Sitting on the doorstep was a doll. Well, not exactly a doll. It was a small figure made from pale woven grass. Story 2. The end of All Hallows Eve. It was All Hallows Eve as the old ones called it, but to us it was simply Halloween, a time for darkened skies, for fallen leaves, golden and brown, and the feet of children kicking with verve through them, for sweets and treats, for frightening films and spooky tales, for free and chip, for the fear and love of the unknown, and for wide grinning turnip heads glowing in the clouded night. And costumes, yes, costumes, some dressed as comical characters, superheroes, and popular tours, others following the traditions of old, dressed as the dead, and embracing the macabre delight of it all. Most kids had Christmas, which I loved too. But for us, Halloween was the most important night of the year, that one time where we could truly be what we dreamed, falling into characters, creatures, and people far removed from the fragility of our childhood selves. Stuart was an undead pirate who had risen up from his watery grave, and if we didn't take part in some lootin' and pillagin', we'd surely have found ourselves walking the plank. Andy was a Terminator, complete with leather jacket, a metallic cheek created with tinfoil, slicked back hair, and sunglasses which hid a glowing red left eye behind. I was Van Helsing, armed to the teeth with wooden stakes, crow, scissors, garlic, and a vial of water I assume was holy, because I had filled it from a tap in the local church's bathroom. Even back then my mind was permanently stuck in a hokey sets and thick case smoke of the old Hammer horror Dracula films. Mac, he was dressed as an injured football hooligan, complete with torn football strip, blooded and bandaged head, and his arm in a sling. All the more ironic as he would in fact grow up to be a footballer. The other Andy, who we affectionately called Squire, was decked in luminous skeleton bones, and with his wiry frame and hooded skull, mask, put the fear of God into quite a few of the younger kids in the neighborhood. We were 12 years old at the time, and while none of us had openly spoke of it, we seemed to sense th at it would be our last year guising, a word which in itself would soon be replaced by the now deep-rooted trick or treat. I remember feeling a sadness in the pit of my stomach as my aunts helped me prepare my costume. The others seemed a little more reluctant to go out that Halloween, and by the following year their delight for the entire celebration would be diminished for many subsequent years. And who could blame them? I just wasn't ready to say goodbye to those fun-filled happy nights, wandering the leaf-covered streets of my local neighborhood, laughing with my friends, carrying bags of sweets and chocolate and toffee apples accumulated from our Halloween rounds. It's rare that you recognize something as coming to its end, mourning for it before it has slipped away. It was 7 o'clock in the evening when we first stepped out into the street, and the winter sky blackened everything from above, the stars snuffed out by a thick shroud of cloud. My house was always the meeting point on those glorious nights, as my parents loved to decorate the house with spider webs, hanging skeletons, and mean-looking banners depicting vampires, ghouls, and cheese fermenting a strange brew, not to mention all of the food. They both seemed to revel in the entire ceremony of the night, more so than anyone else I knew, and they had done since whenever I could remember, for both me and my older brother, who now helped out rather than went out, such wonderful nights as my friends arrived, and we all bobbed for apples or dropped forks from between your teeth into a bucket of water filled with fruit, hoping to skewer one to win a prize. There we were on the street curb, looking up the hill towards King's Drift and the web of streets we were going to explore in search of treats. In some cases, we'd even be given money if the homeowners didn't have any food or had ran out. In more recent times, the jack-o'-lantern age has become popular, with myself always carving a few pumpkins with ghoulish faces for the local kids and their parents, who always frequent our haunted house, with its smoke machines, screaming skulls, and mountains of sweets. That night, however, I carried a tumshi to light the way, essentially a carved-out turnip with a candle inside and a horrible face glowing outward, lighting the way, a far greater and malignant sight than any pumpkin, holding the lantern by a thick piece of string, which my dad had attached to the side of its face with 2 nails. We headed out to enjoy our last night of gooey sing. The streets were abuzz with kids, most of them a bit younger than ourselves, accompanied by their parents or older siblings, which only made me realize how close to the end of our Halloween nights we really were. I believe it was the first time that I ever felt old, no matter how preposterous such a thought appears at only 12 years of age. Most houses opened their doors gladly. Occasionally, you would see a light going off as we approached, signaling that the people inside didn't want to be disturbed. But, damn it, we knocked and banged their doors anyway. This was our night, and the grown-ups who were too stingy to take part should have known better. After an hour, he had covered 3 streets, each time the same social pleasantries taking place. We'd enter the house, slightly cautious at first of being in a stranger's darkened home, but the thought of 5 of us being together banished those worries soon enough. Each of us would then be asked to tell a joke or a riddle, and in return for the entertainment, we would be rewarded with sweets and chocolate. Of course, Annie would try to push the envelope a little more than the rest of us, and on a few occasions delved into what our hot could only be described as adult humor. The grimaces on the faces of those listening were plain to see as we passed the other children in their costumes, some great, some through, when together at the last moment we joked and laughed and celebrated at the growing collection of food and money in our bags. Yes, even if it was going to be the last year, it was surely to be the best of alls as we ran through the darkened streets, lit only by the occasional spot and splash of orange hue from the lights above. It seemed as though the unspoken finality of it, the end of those nights, those years of being what we wanted to be, of being kids, of not caring about how we were seen, that it all added to the potency of the experience. We ran faster, we giggled and laughed, and took shortcuts through gardens and places we were never supposed to tread. We lived and felt alive on that night of the dead. Squire's watch went off at 10 p.m., and we knew it was time to call it a night. We walked back towards my house, where each year we would sit with my parents and some of my neighbors, drinking fizzy juice and stuffing our faces with the chocolate and sweets which we had been given by the bucket load. But our steps were slower than usual on the journey home, our jokes less loud, our grins less wide, and as the lantern gasped its last as we reached the gate "Oh, my garden," it was as if we sighed together, knowing that something precious was soon to be lost forever. As we piled into my house and were greeted by the happy smiles of my parents, they, too, appeared to sense that things were changing, as if part of their lives would never quite be the same. I think it is hardest for parents when their youngest child reaches those thresholds, though closed chapters of their childhood, never to be opened again, knowing that they too cannot live those wonderful nights in quite the same way either. Me, Andy, Stuart, Mac, and D. Squire sat in a circle on the living room floor as an old horror film played in the background. We each in turn emptied our bags, assessing the loot. It was indeed a good year, and the sheer mass of sweets was sure to last us all for one stomach turning. Sugar overdosing week, chocolate bars, crisps, boiled sweets, jelly babies, strawberry laces, toffee apples, and all manner of other treats were cuely separated from the useless bulk fillings of monkey nuts and other fruit. Only the good stuff, only the good. We joked and laughed once more, and in that cozy house we played the parts of kids again, dressed up in costumes, telling spooky stories, and for a moment it felt as though nothing would ever change, that it would always be like that, together as friends, young, hopeful, and courageous, until I asked, almost automatically, what we would all be dressing up as the following year. The question was never answered, and it didn't need to be. It was then that I noticed Annie had stopped talking and hadn't interjected with his usual jokes for at least 2 minutes. Surely a record. No, he was staring at something. We asked if he was okay, but he wouldn't respond. His gaze fixed, glazed over as if he were still wearing his costume sunglasses. We followed the route of that stare, and our eyes and our heads dropped almost in unison, falling upon the source of our Fr. Ian's peculiar silence. Andy was looking at my pile of sweets which sat in front of me, My heart began to thud helplessly as I finally realized what had left the most talkative of my friends speechless. Poking out from that pile of chocolates, crisps, and lollipops was a blooded and severed finger. I can't remember who screamed first. It was probably me, as my cool and calm Van Helsing soon melted away, revealing the shocked and fragile 12-year-old boy at his core. All I know is that my parents called the police, and within half an hour each of us, the undead pirate, the vampire hunter, the luminous skeleton, the football hooligan, and the killer robot from the future, were being questioned about the strange fingers sitting amongst my sweets. We were asked to try and remember which houses we had visited, but we had been to so many, had been so fervent in our need to make the most of that last Halloween night, that we simply could not remember all of them. Soon, several police cars showed up with red and blue and white, lighting up the now lifeless, costumeless street outside, and without wasting a moment they began walking the neighborhood with us and our parents, that place now torn from its disguise, moving swiftly from door to door, trying to find out where the finger had come from, which one of those welcoming, friendly houses with smiling elders, warm fires, carved grinning turnips, and buckets of sweets had taken us into their dimly lit home and given to a child the most horrific of gifts. But it was all in vain. No one claimed our nurship. There was no record of anyone at the local hospital losing a finger that night, not one shred of evidence. Just normal people concerned about the strange discovery he had made and what it might mean. Perhaps it had been an accident. Perhaps it had been cut off in some sort of bizarre mishap, as I had heard of people storing a severed finger in the freezer so that it might be reattached. Maybe it got mixed up with the food somehow. But even at that age I realized how unlikely and ridiculous such a proposal would be. That was indeed the last night we went guising, and in more ways than one, my friend simply did not have the stomach for the childhood charade of let's pretend any longer. Even I did not wish to go out the following year, but for me it wasn't about being too old for it all. I still loved Halloween, and do to this day. It wasn't about outgrowing it. And it wasn't even about that horrible finger which had been placed silently into my treat bag. No, it wasn't that either. What really stopped me from knocking on strangers' doors and asking for some treats was the blooded thumb and 3 fingers carefully placed in the other boys' bags. Story 3, Comfort in Numbers. Ever since I was young, I have lived thinking in numbers. I was brilliant with numbers, so that was what I stuck to doing. I excelled in my math classes all throughout my childhood, so much so that many of my math teachers gave me advanced lessons to keep me on my toes. But it was never a problem with me. I could fix the errors and solve the problems. But that was only a small part of how my brain worked. I am always counting things, everything, to be exact. I can't go throughout the day without numbers rolling through my head. When I wake up, I count my fingers and toes in the shower. I count the square floor tiles. At breakfast, I count how many pieces of cereal are on my spoon before placing it into my mouth. On the way to town, I count the amount of cars I pass. Some of you may think that this little habit is strange, but it has always been a part of who I am. I always remember these numbers as well. In fact, I can tell you right now that there are exactly 30 socks in my drawer, 15 pairs if you want to count them that way. I know that there are 8 eggs left in the carton in my fridge, 6 pieces of bread in the box, 11 icons on my computer desktop, 3 freckles on my hand. This list could go on and on. Remembering all of it is a curse and a blessing. It helps me keep track of where everything is and how I manage most of it. But the downside is that it comes with very acute paranoia. While I can obviously remember all these numbers, I constantly worrying about them changing without my knowledge. I once kicked my old high school friend out of my house when she didn't tell me that she had taken one of the 7 pieces of gum I had left in the packet. Seeing that there was only 6, knowing that one of my life variables had changed without my permission, made me tense. There wasn't much social interaction in my life. People were too hard to count and keep track of. They moved too much, changed too much. They made my numbers unstable, and I could never keep track of all of them. So, for the sake of my sanity, I worked from home and lived in complete isolation. Some of my family said that I wasted my talent away by picking a safe job, but I didn't need them in my life. Cutting contact with them reduced an equation that had too many changing variables. I live in the country, way off the road, surrounded by field. I would have secluded myself further by living in the forest, but I feared that I would go nuts trying to count all the trees. It was hard enough to prevent myself from counting the blades of grass in my lawn. I didn't need the additional distraction. When I needed food or anything else, I paid the couple that hived 5 miles down to go to town and get my groceries for me. They had 3 children and 2 dogs. Very rarely did I ever venture into town myself, and when I did it was very brief and hastily done, trying to distract myself from all the things to count. Nearly drives me insane, but I managed. I've always managed. The solitude helps. It keeps my habit in line. I have my things to count. I am aware when they change, and I don't have constantly unreliable variables in my life. Everything is normal until that one day. I tried to tell myself that it wasn't true, that I was miscounting, but that was impossible. I never miscounted, ever. When I went to pour my cereal that morning, I noticed something horribly wrong. I had exactly 8 of each piece of silverware in my drawer. 8 forks, 8 spoons, 8 butter knives, 8. But when I was counting my spoons, I was 1 short. Immediately perturbed, I combed the entire house for the missing spoon. Within my search, I also found that one of the 5 beads on my curtain drawstring was missing, one of my 30 socks gone, and 2 pieces of the 6 pieces of bread I had mysteriously disappeared. I felt heat rising to my head and my vision hazing. My numbers were wrong. Someone changed them. Someone had gotten into my house and changed them. Many people would not jump to conclusions, losing such small, easy to misplace or forgettable things. People lost things all the time, but not me. I never lost my numbers. They were what kept me in order. I had control over my numbers. No one else. I did not like anyone messing up my numbers and changing them. They were mine. I searched for hours trying to find these missing things. I checked every single place in my home, even the most unbelievable ones. I even called up that family 5 miles down and asked if one of their 3 children had touched anything the last time they had been delivering my groceries. I knew I had counted these things after that. They hadn't, or at least the parents didn't believe so. I had been searching so fiercely that I had almost skipped my time for work. Though I didn't want to give up on looking for these lost numbers, I forced myself to sit down and start working at my computer. The whole time I edited reports, I thought of my missing numbers. Why I would keep track of word count and add up all the errors I corrected, but I couldn't pull my thoughts away from my disturbing findings. Not only was I completely off balance, I was worried for my safety. It was obvious that someone had come in and taken these things. Why or how, I did not know. But my house was no longer safe. I was no longer safe. And apparently, neither were the bears that made up my life. After my work was finished, I resumed looking for these missing pieces of my life. I hadn't eaten breakfast, had skipped my lunch, and I skipped right over dinner to look for my numbers. I checked the same places over and over again, hoping that I had skipped something. When midnight hit, I had searched my house exactly 37 times. The last 21 times included a full sweep around the front porch of my house. All of those times had come up completely blank. My numbers were gone, stolen. Shaken, I fell into my bed, exhausted, at 1:26 in the morning. The weather outside had turned from a decently cold day to a windy turmoil constantly howling in the background. I curled up beneath my covers in discontent. I closed my eyes and began counting in my head to try and lull myself into sleep. My numbers popped into my head. I was discontent, thinking over how they'd changed. Just as I had begun to fall asleep, I heard my old house groan against the wind pushing outside. My eyes snapped open, and I began to count the amount of creaks it made. 1, 2, 3. When daylight shined through the window, I was still staring at ceiling. The wind died down after an hour, but I had kept counting. I could hear it in my head, and I had to keep counting. Everything needed to be counted. How many times I blinked, breathed, moved, it needed counted. Everything needed counting. 56, 57, 58. My alarm clock suddenly went off, but I didn't even blink. The numbers in my head started over, counting the amount of beeps going off in the background. I got up, but I didn't turn off the alarm. I kept on counting as I collected clothes for the day. My whole face twitched hour, and I saw that one of my shirts was missing, along with one shoe. From a pair, it was becoming harder to breathe. I was seeing red, but I was still counting. 1, 2, 3. I walked into the bathroom, my arms clenching violently after seeing the fake plant in the hallway. Suddenly had 35 leaves instead of 36. I slipped into the shower, starting over once again to start counting shower tiles as I ran shampoo and conditioner through my hair. 11, 14. When I had finished my shower and had clothed myself, I was drying my hair in front of the mirror when I saw him. He looked just like me, made of 2s and 5s, just like me. 2 eyes, arms, legs, ears, feet, hands, 5 fingers, toes. His face was like mine. Leaning closer to the mirror, I saw him lean in as well. I watched as he grinned at me. 28 adult teeth gleaming in the mirror light. He winked and plucked one of the 2 toothbrushes I had sitting on the counter, stuffing it into his pocket and disappearing, hissing in disbelief. I looked down to see that brush gone. My head was spinning, and I quickly started counting the light bulbs in the hallway lamps as I stalked my way through the H2s. The more I walked around, the more I saw missing. Each missing item made my mind spin, and I had to start counting again. 16. 1, 2, 3. I saw him again, kitchen. But he was different. He was no longer made up of 2s and 5s. A third arm from the shoulder, for fingered hands, one hand and one grinning mouth. Hands clenching, I swung for him, only to smash my hand right into the reflective surface of my refrigerator. Howling in agony, I spun around to look for where he'd gone. He was quick. I had to give him that. Quick and a changing variable. I hate him. When I saw that he was nowhere to be found, I decided to just fix myself some breakfast in peace. I counted out my granola bars, which were in a basket where that man had been standing. I was furious to see that 2 of the 14 bars were gone. I left the kitchen after that, too disgusted to eat, and besides, I wasn't even that hungry. I saw him again when I sat at my computer, staring at me from within the blank monitor. He didn't have a mouth this time, or a nose, just wide eyes staring at me. I could see the smugness in their depths. He liked what he was doing to me. Giving an angry yell, I picked up the monitor and threw it across the room. It gave so easily, I was surprised, only to become more outraged when I saw that the cords that connected the monitor to the tower were gone anyway, stolen just like the rest of my numbers. Trying to quell my pent-up fury, I began to count items sitting on my desk. 5, 10, some were gone. I tried for different hiding places in my house. I needed to hide from him, hide somewhere he couldn't steal my numbers anymore. I just wanted to count. I needed to count. But he wouldn't. Let me finish. I needed to finish counting. Something needed to be stable. I barricaded myself into my small, cramped, spare bedroom closet. I had nothing in there. Nothing he could steal. The only thing it had aside from the walls keeping it together was the single mirror built into the wall. I leaned against it, wrapping my arms around my knees, rocking myself slowly, trying to breathe. He again, trying to keep my head clear. I began to count the number of wood planks making up the floor. 12, 13. When I ran out of planks to count, I began to count my fingers and toes. 8, 9, 9. My ring finger on my left hand was gone, not severed, just gone. 16, 17. Some toes were missing as well. I was not constant. I was losing more of my numbers, losing myself. I turned towards the mirror and saw him again. He had no eyes, no limbs, just one single large grin. He was smiling at me. Knowing what I was thinking, I craned my head back slowly, watching him do the same. Once I was back far enough, I rammed myself straight forward, smashing my head against the glass of the mirror. 1, 2, 3. I could feel the glass shards in my face. I felt my head throb for times before I began to slip under. The 3 crashes of shattering glasses played in loop through my head. 2 times my vision blurred before going black, and only once did I smile, knowing that I had finally solved the biggest equation of all. Story 4. Mr. Livingston, dear Mr. Livingston, I understand that you are a man of business, often solely occupied in the matters that brings such a lively income to our estate. My good sir, I write you at this time imploring you to return home at once, for we have been visited by a great darkness at Whippercher Estate. I shall recount to you the events of the last 3 days with as much accuracy as I can manage under the circumstances. It began with a knock on the door and a strange girl begging enter. She was but a little thing, perhaps 10 years of age, drenched from the storm that tore across Whippercher. Mrs. Livingston insisted that she enter, mes devoirs, and I fixed the little one supper. Mrs. Livingston supped with her, inquiring as to her name and why she was in this part of the country at night. The girl ate quietly, knobby little hands quivering, answering nothing. She only stared into her bowl of soup like a looking-glass. I remember her reminding me of the little black rat that stole into the kitchen last week, sullen hands and features. When the child finally spoke, her voice chimed off the glasses at the table. Do you not remember, mother? Whatever do you mean, child? Speak your name. You never gave me a name. Mrs. Devois and I stared at one another. Quite baffled, Mrs. Livingston's face paled. She frantically pushed herself up from the table. Who are you? Who sent you? Tell me this instant, child. Which of my cruel neighbors has sent you to torment me this way? You know who I am. Mother, why do you call me that? Why do you call me mother? Oh, wicked child! Naughty child! Mrs. Livingston wrung her hands, tearing the napkin from her neck. Mrs. Devois and I knew not what to do with ourselves in this moment, for we stood paralyzed betwixt curiosity and bewilderment. My good sir, having served you for many years, the known of your wife's barren state, I've watched Mrs. Devois wash bloody garments month after month since the two of you wed 10 years ago. Surely the little villain was playing in a scheme gauged on by cruel neighbors who have been suspicious of your childless marriage. An evil thing indeed to do in return for such hospitality offered by the good Mrs. Livingston. I have no child. Your wife clapped her hands over her mouth. Tell them, mother. I rushed forward to seize the little thing, as Mrs. Livingston was in hysterics, violently weeping into her palms. Tell them who I am. It's not possible, Mrs. Livingston sobbed. I grabbed the girl by her shoulders and pulled her towards the door in the entryway. The little creature drew her head back and spat in my face. Mrs. Devois rushed to Mrs. Livingston's side, fanning the distraught woman. I opened the front door and pushed the girl out into the rain. You shan't read her. And to bother Mrs. Livingston again. Run along now, you wicked thing. The girl turned. Lightning and thunder shattered the chorus of the pattering rain. The lightning illuminated the girl's black eyes into the most hateful red. How my soul quaked at those eyes. I slammed the door and crossed myself at once. I returned to the dining room to find Mrs. Devois consoling your Mrs. Livingston. We put her to bed with a cross and a prayer, pleading the dear Lord to guard against the demons that haunt her sleep. Mrs. Devois and I extinguished each candle throughout the house, whispering in our hearts as the soft glow vanished between our fingertips. Sleep seemed to dampen the previous night's horrors, for in the morning, Mrs. Devois and I cheerfully set about making our Mrs. Livingston's breakfast as pleasant as ever. A hot pot of tea and shortbread were served beside a poached egg. Mrs. Devois retrieved flowers for a centerpiece, placing the lovely little blues in a vase on the table. We waited patiently for Our Lady to emerge from her room. We reheated the pot of tea twice while waiting. Mrs. Livingston didn't enter the dining hall until nearly 10, her usual gaiety overed with wrinkles of exhaustion. Her normally kept bun hung in disarray. The poor woman sat down in silence, sipping her tea without the usual deliberation accompanying her movements. Finally, without turning her gaze from the vase, said, "Those are lovely flowers, Mrs. Devois. They're not the usual, though. Pray, tell me what they're called. Forget-me-nots." Mrs. Livingston stopped the teacup hinges from her lips. What did you say? Forget-me-nots, madam?" Mrs. Livingston spat. "Where did you discover them? Where did they come from?" "Why, they must have sprung up within the last few days, madam. They're growing all over the grass in front of the house." Your wife's face turned a ghastly white. "I want them all out. Throw them all out." Mrs. Livingston rose rigidly, throwing her napkin down onto her plate, leaving the shortbread untouched. "Why, yes, madam. I didn't throw them all out." Mrs. Devoe as quickly whisked away the vase. I followed Mrs. Livingston to the front room, where she had yanked open the drapes. I caught her as she stumbled back, gasping. Forget-me-nots covered the entirety of the front lawn, the rolling fog making the lawn appear as a blue sea in the storm. Mrs. Livingston rushed to the door, scraping the locks open, jutting herself out the door. "Madam, you'll catch cold." Your wife cast herself upon the blanketed lawn. I hadn't ever witnessed such behavior in a human being before. It was as though a wild beast had taken possession of the woman. She crawled on all fours, ripping flowers out in clumps. Mrs. Devois rushed to calm her. She attempted to hold her arms down, trying to take the flowers from her clenched fists. Mrs. Livingston struggled violently, thrashing about in her arms. I came to the aid of Mrs. Devois, and we managed to drag her back into the house. However, your wife bit Mrs. Devois' arm, drawing blood and leaving marks from her teeth. Blood trickled all over the Persian rug in the entryway, and all the way up the stairs. My dear sir, we had no choice. We barred her in her bedroom, locking her door and placing a steel rod against it. She pounded at the door, howling, "Oh, forgive us this treatment, Mr. Livingston. We meant no harm." Mrs. Devois tended to her arm, wrapping a bandage around, bloodying the white linen. You don't understand. We heard these howls from the bedroom for the duration of our mourning. Violent sobs followed for hours. Mrs. Devois watched by the door with a pained expression and weariness in her bones. She and I traded places beside the door, ensuring that your wife posed no harm to herself. Finally, a silence rang from the room, lasting for hours. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when we unlocked the door. Mrs. Livingston was squatting next to her bed, cradling a white blanket in her arms like an infant. Her hair hung about her shoulders in disarray, torn from a bun. She whispered incoherently into the blanket. We, with the door open, staring in disbelief. Your Mrs. Livingston has always been a woman of propriety, never letting those in her company see her as anything but distinguished. I had always thought her to be an upright woman before God. I had always believed her to be benevolent. I had never questioned her as good. Dear God, Mr. Livingston, did you know, in all of my decades of service, I had never heard such a tale as the one your wife wove. evoking the fabrics of disdain and darkness. She saw myself and Mrs. Devois standing in the doorway. Her eyes would not have been out of place in a mortuary. If asked to swear on my holy Bible that the woman was alive, I could not have brought myself to do so. Mrs. Livingston's lifted her face from the blanket. Her thin lips quivered. In her agonized state, she had bitten off the top layer of flesh. Blood dripped down her chin, staining the white blanket in her arms. Mrs. Devois clasped her hands over her mouth. "Dear Lord in heaven, madam, tell them who I am." A warbling hiss rippled through the room. I threw my arms around Mrs. Devois' shoulders, stumbling back. "Who is there?" I shouted into the wooden panels of the ceiling. "Tell them who I am." Mrs. Livingston bit went on a clenched fist, shaking her head violently. A black mist began to fall from the ceiling, and a small figure shrouded in darkness rose beside the bed. It was the devilish girl, cloudy red eyes illuminated in the mist. Mrs. Devois screamed. The girl bent beside Mrs. Livingston's ear, gripping her shoulder with white hands. "Tell them who I am." Mrs. Livingston began to weep, slamming her palms against the wooden floor, thrusting aside the bloody white bundle. "Then tell them what you are." "No, it's not possible. Bring not your treachery upon this woman." I leapt forward, only to be driven back by the little figure snarling at me like a cat. "Please," Mrs. Livingston begged, "I am innocent." She turned her face to us, tears streaming down a withered face. "See, oh, how I thought that my nightmares might end. How I thought that one night might bring comfort." The girl dug her nails into Mrs. Livingston's shoulder. Your wife cried out in anguish. Finally, between sobs, she told us the cause behind this unspeakable evil. I was young. I had no choice. I had no choice. The girl threw back her head and emitted a hideous roar. "I gave you away to a sea people walking alongside the road where I birthed you. You were born in a field of forget-me-nots on a rainy day. Their fragrance still stings my nose with the stench of a broken soul. I was betrothed to James Livingston. My engagement would have been broken if anyone had found me out. I had no choice. You don't understand. My family had no money. I was the last hope for my parents. We would have rotted in debtor's prison. Our mouths gaped open. Our lady had not seemed capable of bearing a child, let alone at a young age. Oh, sir, did you know? I was not at fault. The father of your body pushed himself upon me one night. Morris Angler. I was walking home one night when he attacked me. I wanted nothing of it. Now I am unable to bear children to my husband. These years since your birth have aught only the greatest cruelty. Oh, spare me, oh God, spare me, for I have been broken." She keeled onto the floor, sobbing. The girl extracted her hand from your wife's shoulder. The smoldering seethe of hatred slowly dissipated from her face into a look of consideration. Morris Angler. Again the hiss echoed in our ears. "He is the cause of my death. That couple treated me like a sick dog. They abandoned me. They left me to beg and starve." Morris Angler. She leaned forward over the quaking Mrs. Livingston. "We shall have our revenge." Mother, the creature stepped, head back, and vanished, leaving behind a mist of blood. Silence drifted into the room as the last rays of the day bled through the window. Mrs. Devois and I cleaned and bandaged the wounds raked on your wife's shoulder. The 5 gashes were deep and required stitching. Her lips will require months to recover. We called on Dr. Tarwell to come tend to her at once. We have spent our days attending. NG to your wife and the house with trembling hands and hushed tones. Mr. Livingston, Morris Angler, lives but 3 miles from our estate. Word has reached me that he was found dead in his barnel last night. Authorities think that he was attacked by an animal. His face had been torn through. His nether regions had been severed as well. But we know what has befallen the late Morris Angler. Sir, pray that this evil reside in our town no longer. Return home to your wife, who is under the care of those whom love her. She is ill with guilt and grief. She has injuries that will require months of repair and tending. She has the wound of a lifetime which will require perhaps the remainder of her lifetime to heal from. Return home to us as quickly as you are able. May God watch over you. Edgar Devois. Story 5. I can see them. I could always see them. I don't think they have yet noticed me. Noticing them, they are everywhere. They follow us at work. They sit with us on the city bus or on the subway. They are there when we eat, watch TV, sleep. Even when we fuck, they whisper to us. They whisper, and we hear them. We believe we are experiencing random thoughts or having nervous breakdowns or simply going insane. But it is them. They are watching, whispering, waiting. When I was a kid, I kept all this very hush-hush. As my mom would say, I told my very closest friends, but never my parents. No one ever really believed me. Why should they? I mean, really formless black clouds hovering alongside people, whispering evil thoughts into their subconscious minds as they go through their daily routines. Sounds like a Stephen King movie, right? I have learned through these long, dark years that some, like myself, hear them very well. They don't see them as I do, but they sense them and hear their evil suggestions. These people are the Ed Geyons and Jeffrey Dahmers of the world. Others hardly recognize their presence. They may succumb to the less evil suggestions like petty theft, sodomy, promiscuity, but they don't hear the more vile suggestions. Some, it seems, don't hear them at all or have learned to ignore them. How I envy those few. Always have and always will. When they whisper to me, it hurts. My mind struggles with their subliminal injections. My conscious mind is fully aware of what is happening, while my subconscious insists that these thoughts are my own deepest desires. Sometimes, when they suggest things that are beyond mere human evils, I have explosive migraines and nosebleeds, yet somehow they seem not to notice these days. I think they choose not to. Whatever the case, I can't live like this anymore, watching the world fall apart around me, knowing the cause, yet unable to stop it. I am writing this because I have decided to end it all. I am hopeful that there may be others like me, others who may in time devise a to stop them, maybe even eradicate them. I dream of a world without their influence, and it is that which has driven me to this point. Goodbye, world, may you fare better than I slide my chair away from the desk, sighing heavily. I head to the kitchen for one last shot of bourbon. Man, am I going to miss this taste? Knowing my immediate future, I decide that another one, 2, even 3 shots isn't such a bad idea. They go down smooth, full of flavor, and with that slight bite that I love. As the bourbon slowly slips into my bloodstream, I can feel the buzz stirring and growing in my head. It is a welcome feeling, calming and steadying my nerves for the work ahead of me. I glance one last time at my computer screen, scanning over what is to become my last will and testament. I shrug as I turn away and head to the stairs toward my bedroom, my gun cabinet, my sweet, long-awaited release from this madness that has become my life. As I react, into my pocket for the key to the cabinet, I pause, arguing with myself. It doesn't have to be this way, I think to myself. You could go on living just fine. You just ignore the state of the world like everyone else. These arguments were valid, but I can't abide. I know better. I may be able to live that way for a few more years, but the more I see, the less I feel like living. It has to be this way, I say aloud, taking the cabinet key from my pocket. This is the only way, I think. As I turn the key, a single tear slides down my cheek. I pick up my point for 5W, catching the light bouncing off of the metal. So beautiful, I drop the clip, ensuring that it is indeed loaded. As I slide the clip back into place, the true gravity of the situation starts to sink in, but I push it aside. With the loaded gun in hand, I sit down on the edge of my bed. My heart begins to race, my hand slightly shaking as I place the barrel against my temple. I draw in a deep breath and release it in a heavy sigh as I squeeze the trigger. Darkness all around me. I'm falling. As I sink into the darkness, a loud, thunderous voice pierces my thoughts. It speaks directly into my mind, and I begin to understand my situation. Mark Pinkerton, how I did weep at having to remove your name from the book of life. You have broken my heart, Mark, but you knew what you were doing, and I must take action. You have committed the one sin that cannot be forgiven because of this. Not only can I not accept you into my kingdom, but hell has a special place for you now, Mark. Goodbye, my son. As I fall, I began to sob. I had never even imagined that God was there, that he was in fact watching me, or even that an afterlife existed. Had I known then what I know now, my life would not have been what it was or what it is. Suddenly I land, smashing into a surface that feels like concrete or asphalt. Pain courses through my body from my head to my feet, dazed, in pain, and beyond confused. I push myself into a sitting position. I groan gradually, my brain still trying to comprehend what is happening as my eyes adjust to the darkness to a degree I would never have dreamed possible. That's when I see them. They are here. How could they be here? Is it not their job to influence the living? They glide just above the floor, formless black clouds churning and roiling. Like the sea, I can't move, frozen in place by sheer terror as I realize that now they can see me. There are at least a dozen of them floating around me in a circle. Then, suddenly, I feel my wrists and ankles encircled in their freezing cold darkness, and I am lifted from the floor. As I hang there, I begin to see another form emerging from the darkness, a face that can only be described as artfully chiseled, framed by long blonde hair, and home to the most beautiful blue eyes I've ever seen. Within moments I can see that this face is attached to the body of a Greek god. He is the most perfectly built man I have ever seen, but I know that he is not truly a man. As he approaches, the black clouds break their circle to allow him passage. He stops a foot in front of Emmy and smiles. Mark, my dear boy, we've been expecting you. At this he leans in until his nose is almost touching mine and stares deeply into my eyes. He then gently takes my face and turns it left and right. Ah, yes, he speaks in a voice as smooth as silk. You will fit in quite nicely here, Mark. He then turned around and strode off into the darkness. As soon as he is no longer are visible, the black clouds reform their circle, and it begins to close. I black out. When I come to, I am strapped to a chair. It reminds me of old Sparky from the Green Mile. My arms and legs are buckled tightly into leather straps, my head restrained as, well, one of the black clouds floats towards me now with a long protrusion sticking out of its right side. Perhaps an arm it is holding, a device that resembles a soldering iron with a thick black cable plugged into the bottom. The cable stretches off into the darkness where I can faintly hear screaming, crying, and heavy machinery in one swift, hardly visible motion. The black cloud pierces my temple with the device, and I howl in agony. As I strain against my restraints, my vision blurs and becomes darkness, and my hearing dwindles, and, oh, deafness! I continue to struggle as the soundless black void becomes filled with horrible visions. I am shown the most grotesque and horrendous scenes from mankind's violent reign of terror upon the earth, rape, murder, theft, lying, adultery. If you can imagine it, I am seeing it. I am so immersed that my struggling weakens in the twitching of my fingers and toes. My teeth begin to jar, and my once sightless eyes dart from place to place. This goes on for what seems like an eternity. I see everything, every vile thing that every person has ever done, and then some. I am shown things that men and women may have dreamt, but could never commit. Suddenly it stops as I am brought back into the darkness with them. I see one of them floating away with the device. As another approaches, my restraints open, and I am once again lifted into the air. Two of them are carrying me into the darkness. I begin to see shapes emerging. They appear to be more people, floating. No, hanging. As I get closer, I can see that they are hanging from large hooks suspended by chains that rise into the dark abyss. Their necks are cut from ear to ear, their arms are cut from wrist to elbow, and they are being bled as realization sinks in. So do the hooks. I am impaled by two large hooks just under my neck. The two black clouds hover in front of me for a moment and then float off into the darkness. I hang here in agony, awaiting my next punishment. I begin thinking that perhaps this is it. Perhaps this is my eternity. That is when a new face emerges from the darkness. As this one, however, was twisted, gnarled. It may have been the face of a man at some time in the distant past, but no more. As it approaches, I can see that its body is twisted. T's joints assembled at odd angles. It has 3 extra arms, 2 on the right and 1 on the left. Its hands are disfigured with odd numbers of fingers, and in each of them is a blade. They are different shapes and sizes, covered in the blood of its victims, some with small pieces of skin or ligament clinging to them. The creature carefully pokes the tip of a blade into the flesh under my right ear and slowly slips it through my neck, the left. I try to scream, but I only gurgle, nearly choking on the blood. It then takes my right hand and turns my arm over, palm up, and again inserts the tip of its blade through the skin into the vein under my wrist, and in one long stroke opens the vein all the way to the elbow. It then repeats this process on the left arm and turns to disappear into the darkness. I can feel my life's blood flowing steadily, swiftly down my body. I begin to grow tired and cold as the world slowly slips away again. I am brought to by the screams emanating from the darkness. I lift my head only to see the creature approaching again. At the edges of my vision I can see empty hooks swinging gently. Where are the others? What fate did they meet? And is it the fate that approaches me as well? This time I can see that the creature is approaching me with empty hands, sneering. It reaches out with its extra left hand, which is smaller, almost withered, and forces it into my mouth. I can taste the blood from previous victims, smell its stench of death and decay as it forces its wriggling hand due. When my throat, as I choke, I can see its elbow approaching my mouth, feeling my inside stretch and tear. Then it stops and begins groping around, trying to find something. It clamps its hand into a fist and slowly begins to extract its find. As it does, I can see its arm emerging from my mouth and feel my insides pulled upward. Once its hand was free of my mouth, I could see it was holding something black and squirming. No, not squirming, shimmering. As it is pulled farther out, my vision becomes split. I am simultaneously watching this thing being pulled from my mouth and watching myself being pulled from a lifeless corpse. Within seconds I am free. I am finally free of that horrid sack of meat, its putrescence to be left behind for eternity. I have finally learned the truth, and the truth is, I've got work to do. Story 6, The Haunted Game Boy Camera. I'll never ask for anything else again, I swear, Mom. As kids, we've all said it at one point. We find something that seems the most amazing item in the world, and we just have to have it, no matter what. For me, it was the newest handheld, a Game Boy Color. It was the most beautiful thing to a 6-year-old, especially when all my friends were getting theirs, growing up with 4 brothers and sisters, and not especially well off. My parents did their best, but we struggled to get by most of the time. They did their best to give us comforts and toys, but new electronics were out of the question. Hell, we were still working off an old television that still used rabbit ears. I was the youngest of the 5 of us, so that meant a lot of hand-me-downs as well. I was used to it, but still held some resentment to my siblings and, of course, still begged for the Game Boy Color T. They said they would do their best, bless their hearts. Shortly after my birthday, my mom and dad presented me with a box. I was surprised, but they said they had found something they knew I wanted very badly, and I had been good. My heart raced with excitement as I tore into the box, but sank into the pit of my stomach. It was not a Game Boy Color. This poor excuse for a handheld was a badly abused original Game Boy. It looked like it had been bitten and melted by something in the corners, as well as stained. Up on top, a strange camera stuck out of the cartridge inserted inside. When I picked it up, it read Game Boy Camera. They'd somehow managed to find it with the crappy little printer as well, complete with fading printer paper. You see, Daddy and I found it at a garage sale. It's exactly the kind you wanted. It even has a cool little camera to take pictures. They said, far more excited than I was. I'm not sure if it was the fact that this was the first thing that had ever been given to me first, and it still was someone's used piece of junk, or that they had no actual idea what I had wanted. Or maybe they had and just decided it was tea. Oh, much so a replacement would suffice, and I'd never know the difference. But in my utter disappointment, I threw the worst tantrum I'd had since I was a toddler. I tossed the box on the ground and cried my eyes out, screaming how they were awful, and I didn't want this, and I wanted my game more color. Well, you can imagine how that turned out. I got a good whooping from my father in front of all my siblings, and a long lecture on gratefulness and how hard they work. In punishment for my selfishness, they gave my gift to my brother Ryan, only a couple years older than me. I was so angry I didn't care, though, and was happy to be rid of the thing. Ryan, being the jerk he was, teased me about it endlessly. It was a few days after that he figured out the camera and printing on it. He LD teased me from his room, talk about how he got to play with the cool system, and I was too little and bratty to ever touch it. I would either yell back at him or slam the door to my room and ignore it. Shortly after, though, I heard him leave his room and call out to our mom, claiming the printer was acting weird. She was busy making lunch, and told him it was probably due to being used, and to keep trying and see if it would fix itself. I heard him go back into his room, then go back out a little while later, saying it was probably busted and that he was going to go to his friend's house, wondering what was wrong with it. I snuck into his room and found the papers lying on his bed. He'd taken photos of himself, making weird faces into the camera. The game stem had been turned off, as expected. The first few pictures were normal, then they changed into those strange faces that everyone knew about. The way the printer paper was stained, they looked even weirder. As I looked down at the later pictures, though, they looked different. Obviously, the camera in the game was not the greatest, so it was sometimes hard to see details of someone's face, or it would look blocky or blurry. The later pictures, however, seemed to change. It wasn't just scribbles or silly words written on his face. His features seemed to change, and there were dark spots around his eyes and mouth. His expression didn't look goofy anymore. Instead, it looked scared. Each picture seemed to change it more and more. Eventually, the pictures changed to where it didn't even look like he was holding the camera anymore, but that someone was taking the picture of him. He got farther and farther away, and what seemed to be a horrible story unfolded. It was showing Ryan running from the camera. The last picture was showing Ryan's face half missing, dark pixels spilled out from the side of his head, and lying on the ground. I didn't know what to think. I didn't even know the little camera was capable of things like this. It frightened me immensely, and I jumped from the bed and ran to my mom, telling her about the pictures. She didn't believe me and got angry I was playing with it after my behavior. She scolded me and sent me back to my room. I was too nervous to be angry, though. I wondered what was wrong with that Game Boy. Why did it read those pictures? I was immensely relieved when Ryan came back home at night for dinner. He seemed fine, and after that night I convinced myself it must have been a problem with the system since it was so beaten up, some kind of error. At some point later in the week, Ryan tried again to take pictures. I heard him call it a piece of junk and then chuck it into a drawer. He threw all the pictures he had taken in the trash can. I didn't think much of the Game Boy and the camera until the week after. I had been coloring in my room when I heard a terrible scream from outside and the sound of brakes squealing to a stop. Immediately, we all jumped up and ran outside to find out what had happened. Along with our neighbors, the sight that greeted us all still as boo burned into my memory. Ryan had gone to walk across the street to his friend's house just as he would any other day. A man had come speeding down the street and hit him. He'd been pulled under the car and his head half crushed under the tires as the man hit the brakes. My older brother's brain and skull were splattered under a pool of blood soaking into the street. I still remember the cry of agony and horror my mother let out, and the rage and grief in my father's eyes as he pulled the man from the car and shouted at him, asking him what in the hell he had been doing to hit a child. My sisters pulled me back inside, trying to comfort me and shield me from the sight, but the damage was done. I'd seen exactly what the picture had showed me, and I knew that Game Boy had been the cause. In my naivete, I tried to tell them, hoping they would believe me. They didn't believe me at all, and it made one of my sisters fall apart. The next few weeks were miserable. My parents were inconsolable, and my mother could barely take care of the house and us. My eldest sister, Andrea, took over her role and struggled with it, angry with us and dealing with her own grief. She also took over cleaning out Ryan's side of the room that he shared with my other brother. At some point, she found the Game Boy and the Game Boy camera and asked if I wanted it. I told her it was cursed, that it had killed Ryan. She said that I was being cruel to our parents by turning their gift that was meant for me into a guilt trip, and that I needed to stop being so selfish. The funeral for Ryan caused even more money stress on the family, and slowly, even at the young age I was, I could see they were not able to handle any of it well. I did my best at that point to keep out of trouble and didn't say anything more about the Game Boy camera. I don't know when she took them, but at some point I guess she needed a distraction from trying to hold up the house. I went into my sister's room to find a missing sock and thought maybe it had landed into their clothing. Her trash can had the same printer paper in it. An ice-cold sweat came over my body when I realized I couldn't stop myself. I reached in and looked at the pictures. They were the same. Andrea's face was slowly transformed into looks of horror and fear before showing her in a grotesque and terrifying position that I could only assume was a clue to how she would die. In the ending pictures, her face was barely recognizable and her skin was black. I was definitely sure now this thing had to be destroyed. I thought to myself that maybe if I could destroy it, I could save my sister from the same fate. I tore her room apart searching for the Game Boy. Eventually I found it and the printer. As I held it in my hand, something chilling happened. It turned on, the screen flashed the logo before it began to make noises and music. The sound was wrong, as though it were being played backward. I had been looking straight at it, and suddenly my face appeared on the screen. It began to print. In my panicked state, I went to shut it off, but found the button was down already. I'll not have been running. I then proceeded to rip the printer paper out and the game out of the system. The Game Boy began to spark and error, while the printer spewed out ink all over my Andrea's bed. I felt it heat up in my hands and dropped it, watching the screen begin to smoke and the sparks fly out from both the Game Boy and the printer. After a minute or two, it seemed to die. Needless to say, I got in major trouble when my sister came home and found her bed sheets stained with ink and the system broken. My parents were furious and forbid me from going out with friends at all, as well as no TV. I was now considered very irresponsible and not allowed to touch any of my siblings' things. It didn't matter, though. I had saved her from a horrible fate, and the cursed system was gone, or so I thought. I think back and realized that of everything I did, the thing that may have saved me was not letting the printer finish. 6 months later, my sister was killed watch hour, and she was driving home and slipped on something in the road, crashing her car and being trapped inside as it caught fire. When the police came to my parents, they had told them that she was burned beyond recognition, and the only reason they knew it was because she was driving my dad's car. I couldn't save her. I didn't dare tell my parents about the pictures I'd done. To think they would have believed me anyway. Years have passed and we've grown up. My parents never really recovered from Ryan and Andrea's deaths, and they have struggled immensely. The three of us take care of them now, though we still have the old rabbit ears television for comfort's sake. There's still one thought that haunts me, though, and makes it hard to sleep at night. I never found out what T.H.A. did with the broken Game Boy, the camera, and printer. I pray to God every night that the damn thing made its way into some kind of trash compactor or is tangled with the plastic floating in the ocean. I fear that they still wanted it to have use and donated it or sold it for parts. And someone somewhere is repairing it and putting in new paper, and they will see what it was trying to print of me. Story 7. The walk home. My breathing is steady and shallow, the exhales causing slight disturbances in the fog around me, my shoes making a constant smack on the pavement. The mist acts like a thin blanket, dampening my senses, making the world just a little quieter, a little calmer. All around me are the sounds and smells of pure, serene night time. To my left is the pond. Ducks are huddled along the shoreline, sometimes ruffling their feathers or making a sleepy murmur. I just passed the campus daycare. The windows are all dark, and the playground is empty. The swing creaks back and forth slightly. There must be a breeze. I'm on my way back from a long night of studying. It's around 2 a.m. The cafeteria in the university hall is open all the time so students can study late for upcoming finals. I'm not much of a cram studier, so I'm way ahead, and I don't have any exams for a few days. I should have made plans to St. A at Erin's place. She lives on campus in the dorms, and she gave me a copy of her key, which is completely against the rules, by the way, but she figured I might need a place to crash if I ever got too drunk at a campus party, but I'm pretty sure she won't appreciate me storming in at 2 a.m. when she, unlike me, has an exam in the morning. I brought the key with me in case I was too tired to walk home. But alas, coffee is a brilliant invention, and if anything I feel wide awake, so I silently reviewed the topics I'm finished going over. Riemann sums, multivariable integration, domain and range FA plane. Oh shit, I forget how to find domain and nose. Just behind me in the bushes, a rustling. I turn abruptly and see nothing. A rat bursts from the bushes and scuttles across the path. I chuckle at my paranoia and continue walking, trying to regain my train of thought. Forget it. I have plenty of time to study. I can relax and enjoy the serene walk home there, as a noise again, a rustling sound closer to my back. I don't bother to turn around this time, knowing logically that the sound is likely attributed to some other small nighttime creature. But I hasten my pace a little bit, silently admonishing myself for being so ridiculous. I turn right onto a dirt path, my favorite shortcut, which leads away from the edge of the pond. There aren't any street lamps along this route, but it gets me home faster than the alternative. To my left are trees, not a full-blown forest or anything, just some shrubbery planted on campus in an attempt to make it low. Okay, prettier. On my right is a fenced construction site. The breeze makes an eerie sound when it blows through the skeletal frame of the unfinished building. Starlings are gathering in the trees just above my head, noisily expressing their distaste for my presence on their path. Their twittering and chattering is a comforting distraction from the eerie sounds emanating from the unfinished building beside me. The fog has mostly lifted, and I catch a movement out of the corner of my eye, ever so small, just beyond the fence of the construction zone, a fleeting shadow, like a piece of garbage blowing around in the open space. I stop. For some reason I need to look to see if maybe, just maybe, someone is in the empty building. Vandals, maybe. I squint and move closer, rasping onto the chain link in an attempt to see into the dim area behind the boundary, but I see nothing. I shake my head and release my hand from the fence, causing a shudder to go through the length of it. There, a figure sprinting between posts of the unfinished building. I know I saw it, but by the time I focus my eyes into the darkness, it has disappeared again. Then a figure, grotesque and ghastly all at once, otherworldly in some ineffable way, steps out from behind a pile of dirt into the open middle of the site and stares at me. Without being able to discern eyes or any feet, yours at all, I know the figure is looking at me. I startle, abruptly turn away from the fence, and I start walking again, even faster now. I glance over into the construction site as I move, and the figure is still there, a distance away, but walking in pace with me. I speed up, the instinctive prickling sensation of flight running up my spine and making my hair stand on, and multiple thoughts rushing through my head. How many coffees did I have today? Am I hallucinating? Just get home, just get home. When I glance again and the figure is gone, but the sick feeling of being followed is still in the pit of my stomach. I can see a light ahead, and I know I'm almost to the street, so I speed up another notch, almost to the safety and comfort of suburbia, almost in the warm glow of street lamps, almost past the looming construction site. I put my head down and walk even faster. My legs are burning, and it's everything I can do not burst into a full-blown sprint. I look up to see how much closer I am, and it's there, in front of me. The figure is at the end of the path, standing under the street light. It's watching me. Not quite human somehow. I come to a halt. Now I know I'm in trouble. I stand there for a split second. It watching me watching it, and suddenly, abruptly, like some horrible, inverted flash of lightning, the street lamp goes out and I'm plunged into darkness. I can't see it anymore, but I'm not willing to believe it can't see me. So I turn and I run. The moonlight only flashes between the trees. The starlings are gone. I can't sense a breeze. I have no idea where I am on the path, and I'm scared, terrified. I can hear it behind me, a ghastly, curdled gasping sound accompanied by a pattering of the things. Footsteps, they're getting closer, closer, closer. I'm still running, but I shrug off my backpack, letting it fall to the GR. And then I glance back. In the flashes of moonlight, I see the thing tumble to the ground, tripped up by my bag. Definitely not human. I start running faster. There's the pond. I can see it just ahead, the moon reflected in the still water. I reach my turn and get an idea. I sprint in the direction of Aaron's dorm building. I can still hear the thing behind me, but it sounds further away now. I gained some distance. When it tripped, I forced my legs to go even faster. I'm panting and I can't feel my legs. I run back past the campus daycare, back past the cafeteria, and I burst into the courtyard of Aaron's building, sprinting towards the light above the solid steel door, already digging in my pocket for the key. The key? Was it in my pocket, or did I put it in my backpack? Shit. I'm at the door now. The thing is behind me. I know it's getting closer. The light above the door goes out. I fumble in the darkness, desperately digging in my pocket. The eddies of the thing behind me are getting louder and louder. And yes, the key. I'm sweating as I pull the key from my pocket and urgently feel around for the keyhole. Oh God, why did the light have to go out? The key slides into the lock. I turn it, throw open the door, rush inside to the warmth of the lobby, and slam the door behind me. Silence, bang, the thing throws itself against the steel door. Bang, 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 bang. A garbled cry of anger sounds from beyond the door, and then there's nothing, except what sounds like a chuckle, and then the thing is gone. I realize I've been holding my breath, so I exhale. There's a sound behind me, and I jump and turn around. But it's only Erin. Morgan, she says, and I begin to sob. I don't ever cry, but I start bawling. What the fuck? Okay, whoa. What the hell is going on? I heard banging. It woke me up and, well, obviously my room is right here, so I came to see what happened. Are you okay? Why are you crying? Is it that jackass of a boyfriend? I swear to God if he hurt you or something. Now I'm laughing. Why am I laughing? This must be what shock feels like. I don't think you'd. I stop to sob and giggle. Erin looks at me like I'm completely insane. Believe me if I told you what just happened. To me, I start to turn hysterical. Doors in the hallway open, and sleepy students peek their heads out of their rooms to see what the racket is. What the fuck do you think you're looking at? Erin yells at them. Go the fuck back to bed. Fucked. People can't just mind their own goddamn business. Her profuse cursing obviously worked because doors close again and everyone disappears. Okay, well, let's go into my room. My roommate is a psycho, so she probably have a shit fit, but I honestly don't give a fuck at this point. Since when do you cry? Okay, just get in here. She leads a hysterical me into her room, and sure enough, her roommate, I think her name is Sue, gives us a dirty look and makes a show of jabbing her earbuds and turning her iPod on loud, then rolling over and yanking the covers off. Her head, Erin rolls her eyes and flops down on her bed, crossing her legs. You want to tell me what the hell is going on then, Em? It better be good, *****. sometime later in the early hours of the morning following a long, incredulous lecture from Erin about the effects of staying up too late, plus a tangent lecture about how she, unlike some people, has an exam to write in a few hours. He banished me to her dorm room floor with a blanket and a rolled-up hoodie for a pillow and demands that I go to sleep. Still convinced I hadn't imagined the horror of the night, I grudgingly close my eyes, but flashes of the thing's face dart across my eyelids, and I realize that attempting sleep is futile. My phone had also been in my pocket rather than in my backpack, along with Erin's key. I pick it up and seriously consider, for about half a second, calling the police. But what would I tell them? The key? Shit. What did I do with it? I feel around in the dark, but I can remember where I put it in the flurry of action after I made it safely into the building. Erin snoring lightly, and I figure she stay that way for at least a couple more hours. So I resolve to find the key later and in the meantime take advantage of residence facilities. Maybe after a long shower I'll be able to convince myself I've imagined the whole ordeal, or wake up and realize I've been asleep in the cafeteria all this time, or maybe I'll just feel a little bit less crazy. I quietly steal a towel from one of Erin's drawers. It's a good thing I know I can borrow her stuff without asking. Waking Erin up is never a very fun activity. I quietly unlock Erin's door from the inside, since I can't find the key, and I don't care to get locked out, and creep into warmly lit the hallway, tiptoeing my way towards the bathroom. And my stomach suddenly drops, like when you realize that you've forgotten to do something very, very important. I realize with sickly understanding I don't know what I did with Erin's key because I never retrieved it from the outside lock. The whole night comes rushing back to me, the darkness as the light above the door W has extinguished, my panic to get inside to safety slamming the door behind me, the horrible sound of the thing chuckling. There's a step behind me. The lights in the hallway go out,